Hello and welcome to another Magic Duels gameplay. Today we're taking a look at a blue-black control deck called Brains, as it features lots of instants and sorceries, as well as Brain in a jar to go with them. So this is kind of like an Aether Vial, but instead of casting creatures for free, we're casting instants and sorceries for free. So how it works is we can pay 1 mana and tap a Brain in a jar to put a charge counter on it, and then we get to cast an instant or sorcery card with converted mana cost equal to the number of charge counters on Brain in a jar from our hand without paying its mana cost, which is important. So we get a discount on the spell's mana cost if it's an expensive spell, and then we get to cast sorcery speed cards at instant speed, which can significantly change their power level. And then later in the game we can also remove a number of charge counters should the cards in our hand not match the number of charge counters already on Brain in a Jar if we have too many of them. So let's take a look at the rest of the deck. We also have a Jace, Vryn's Prodigy, which is great for a number of reasons. Provides some card selection in the early game, works very well with Madness cards that are in the deck, since we can discard them but still cast them through the Madness mechanic, and then transforms pretty quickly into Jace Telepath Unbound that can control the board or flashback cards from our graveyard. We also have a Thing in the Ice, which can provide some early defense, and then if we remove all the ice counters, it will transform into Awoken Horror, which bounces all creatures and then murders the opponent. We've already discussed Brain in a Jar. Then we also have Just the Wind as a cheap bounce spell with also the Madness ability. So if we discard it, we can pay single blue and still cast Just the Wind. Then we have Nagging Thoughts, which gives us some card selection. So for a single blue and 1 generic mana, we get to look at the top 2 cards, 1 into our hand, 1 into the graveyard, which we'll get to later. It has also some applications and also has a Madness, so if we discard it we can still cast it through Madness. Also, being a sorcery makes it pretty nice with Brain in a Jar, since we still get to cast it at instant speed. Then Murderous Compulsion, 1 and a black for a sorcery that destroys target tapped creature. So usually the downside of Murderous Compulsion is that the creature will already have attacked at least once to become tapped, but if we get to cast Murderous Compulsion at instant speed somehow, either through Madness or through Brain in a Jar, then we can kill a creature that's still declared as an attacker but might not have dealt any damage yet this turn, so we can prevent that damage and kill it right away. We also have some counter spells in Scatter to the Winds with Awaken and Broken Concentration with Madness. Then we have Catalog, which is another Madness enabler, so 2 and a blue to draw 2 cards and discard a card, and when we discard a card we can cast one of our Madness cards also at instant speed if we play Catalog. For example, during the opponent's turn we have 5 mana, then we can discard a Murderous Compulsion and kill one of the opponent's attacking creatures, for example. And the reason we're playing Catalog over a card like let's take a look here. We could also be playing Artificer's Epiphany, since we do have Brain in a Jar as an artifact, but sometimes we actually do want to discard a card to be able to cast Madness cards at instant speed, so that's why we actually prefer the usually worse Catalog over the usually better Artificer's Epiphany, which can sometimes just let us draw 2 cards without having to discard. But in this particular deck I like Catalog more. Then we have some sweepers, 2 copies of Languish to deal with early pressure. And Biting Rain, which only does -2/-2, but it also has Madness, so we can surprise our opponent with it. Then we have some card advantage in Pour Over the Pages, which is also a Madness outlet. Then we get to our win conditions. We've got 1 part Waterveil, which is pretty sweet if we get to cast it off Brain in a Jar, since 6 mana is usually a pretty big cost. And we also get to Awaken it for 9 mana if we want to make a 6/6 creature. But more importantly, part Waterveil combines very nicely with our following card, which is the actual win condition in the deck, which is Arise from the Tides, 6 mana for a sorcery that puts 2/2 black zombie creature tokens on the battlefield, equal to the number of instants and sorcery cards in our graveyard. And we have a number of cards that make us discard cards, so we can kind of accumulate more and more instants and sorceries in our graveyard. All those cantrips kind of put multiple cards in the graveyard. And then we can cast Rise from the Tides on the opponent's end step if we have a Brain in a Jar in play with 5 counters. So when it goes to 6 counters, we get to cast Rise from the Tides. So if our opponent has sorcery speed sweepers like Languish or Radiant Flames, then they don't get to deal with our tokens right away, but we still get an attack in with potentially enough zombies to kill our opponent in one big hit. And if we do get to combine Rise from the Tides with Part of Waterveil, then that should be enough to just kill our opponent in 2 turns. The first turn they might come into play tapped, and then the second turn they can attack. Then our mana base, we've got 10 islands, 7 swamps, then 2 Sunken Hollow, 2 Drowned Catacomb, and then 4 Evolving Wilds. Alright, that's the deck. Now let's jump into some games and see how the deck does. Alright, let's take a look at our opener, which has a Brain in it, so we kind of have to keep. And also just has a nice curve of Nagging Thoughts into Broken Concentration. So Brain in a Jar you can kind of consider a 3-drop, since you can tap it right away, since artifacts don't have Summoning Sickness. So we can play it on turn 3 and tap it right away. So if we want to, we can just cast Nagging Thoughts on turn 2. The downside of course is that we have a number of 3-drops in play. So we might want to play the Brain on 2, then keep up 3 mana to either cast a counterspell or perhaps just put a counter on Brain in a Jar. Our opponent with Sylvan Ranger getting a basic and a Waterveil Abbey, which we have to keep in mind. Alright, so I think we do go with the Brain here, start getting those counters on it as soon as possible. And then next turn we have the option of leaving up all our 3 mana instants or putting counters on the Brain. So let's see what our opponent does here. Anguished Unmaking, that's unfortunate. So one of the few ways to get rid of artifacts that is commonly played. So opponent does pay 3 life, but we lose our Brain, which is unfortunate. So hopefully we find the other one, otherwise we'll have to do without. So yeah, let's just pass and counter something if our opponent plays a relevant card. Otherwise we could catalog. Would be nice to combine it with a Madness card, but we need more mana. Opponent has a nice juicy Woodland Wanderer, which we will counter, since it would have been a 5/5, which even a Languish can't deal with. Also has Vigilance, making it difficult to kill with our Murderous Compulsion. So happy to counter it. Alright, so we can just keep taking 1 here and keep up Counterspell plus Catalog. Next turn we could Catalog plus Nagging Thoughts with Madness. Another Waterveil Abbey. So let's see if our opponent runs out another big creature, or if they're gonna cast some cheap spells to dodge counters. They don't have a play here, so that's good. Let's cast a Catalog. Opponent did have a card with Flash in Archangel Avacyn, so they did get to resolve it, but if we find removal for it, then we get to kill it. Murderous Compulsion does not deal with Avacyn. I think we just discard Evolving Wilds here and hope to find a Languish. Biting Rain is not Languish, unfortunately. So we kind of have a problem, since this also has Vigilance, so we can't kill it with Murderous Compulsion. So we're in a bit of trouble. So we'll probably take a bit of damage from Avacyn. Also have to keep in mind that if we kill one of our opponent's creatures, it will transform and do even more damage. But then it does lose Vigilance, so we could kill it with Murderous Compulsion. But I don't really want to take all that damage right now, so I think we just keep up Counter plus Catalog and our Madness cards for now. And then perhaps next turn we can draw into an answer. Languish, of course, being the cleanest answer to the board. Opponent is gonna hit us for 5. And we'll have to take it. And they follow up with the Gitrog monster, which Languish doesn't deal with, so I think we will counter it. And that's the only thing we can do this turn. Alright, so just a swamp. Let's see. We could Nagging Thoughts, hoping to find a Languish, which I think is fine. So let's go for it. Could also find us another counterspell. Instead finds us Jace, which I guess is better than a land, although I don't really have high hopes for Jace surviving here. We could Biting Rain to flip Avacyn, and then try and kill it with Murderous Compulsion. But that seems like too much damage. So could play Jace, flip it, and try and absorb some damage, but it will likely die. Or we can just catalog and hope to find a card like Languish. Sure, let's go with Jace and then hope to have it survive and maybe draw us into an answer. Don't want to Compulsion the Ranger, of course. So let's see if our opponent has another big hitter. They will attack and I will block the 1 point here. Go to 8. And our opponent has another big hitter in Surin, so they can kill Jace if they want to. And looks like that's what they do. And there's Languish, but now our opponent has a Planeswalker in play. Still looks like the best play here for us. And then we kind of have to find one of our win conditions as soon as possible. Otherwise, Surin's +1 is just gonna kill us. On the bright side, our opponent doesn't have any creature lands, so no damage this turn from Surin, but our opponent does have Tireless Tracker, which is gonna get out of Biting Rain range as soon as it sacrifices a clue, so can't really count on it. So I think we go with Catalog, and I think we don't play the land in case we want to discard it. Although actually we could just wait on the Catalog and cast it during the opponent's turn and then Compulsion the tracker. Might be better than trying to find something on our main phase here. So means our opponent does get another Surin activation. We could even Catalog plus Biting Rain right now to kill the tracker while the trigger's on the stack, which I actually don't hate, since this Biting Rain doesn't look very good right now. So we can discard it, Madness, and try and kill the tracker. That works. So our opponent only got 1 clue, which is good. Since they don't have a ton of cards left. So we did find our win condition. Question is that gonna be good enough? Opponent finds another Anguish the Making with Surin and a Sylvan Advocate, which we can deal with Just the Wind and an Obnixilis. So the hits keep coming. So our opponent has some spot removal that we know of in hand and with Obnixilis, which makes our Rise from the Tides pretty good. So I think we Just the Wind plus Rise from the Tides here, just to get another instant in a graveyard. and then hope our opponent doesn't have any sweepers. Which is not very likely, but we can hope. Could have been a reason not to cast the Just to Win, that way if our opponent has a planar outburst, for example, they kill their own Sylvan Advocate, but I don't really want to take 4 damage, so let's find out if our opponent has a sweeper. Sorin pluses, reveals Woodland Wanderer, so we go all the way down to 1. And even if our opponent doesn't have a sweeper, I don't think we're winning this game, but our opponent does have it. Languish, so yeah, losing that brain was kind of painful, since that meant we couldn't cast as many spells as we would have liked, and we couldn't cast Rise from the Tides at instant speed. So a Murderous Compulsion unfortunately is not going to deal with a Sylvan Advocate, so we are just dead. So a lot of vigilance creatures from the opponent, making Murderous Compulsion pretty awkward. But hopefully that's not going to be the case in our next match. Alright, let's take a look at our opener, which is not exciting. It's got 2 5-mana cards, only 3 lands. I think we can do better. It's not a terrible hand, but I kind of want to look for our exciting 2-drops, which this one does have with Jace, and hopefully Jace survives so we can discard Rise from the Tides, since we won't need both of them, and go from there. So usually mulliganing to try and find a Brain in a Jar, a Jace, or a Thing in the Ice is fine, especially in Magic Duels where you get a free mulligan. So our opponent on the red-green could be a ramp deck of sorts. Naya colors, alright, so an aggressive 2-drop here in Kazakh Forgemaster, which can transform into Flameheart Werewolf. So here, probably gonna leave up Catalog, and we will probably loot with Jace when the Forgemaster attacks in case we find a Murderous Compulsion. But I think I still like the Catacomb here over Evolving Wilds, since we don't have any cards in the graveyard yet, so flipping Jace faster isn't really a consideration. So could have cast Catalog in our main phase. Alright, so let's hope to find a counterspell. Did not find a counter. Instead, let's discard a Rise from the Tides. We will get hit for 3. And I think we catalog over sacrificing the clue here, just to smooth out our draw a bit better. Alright, don't need both Evolving Wilds. Alright, so hopefully we can find a 2-mana Madness card in the following turn, so that we can pour over the pages plus Madness, which will also transform the Werewolf back. Opponent with Explosive Vegetation, so kind of a mix of aggressive cards and ramp cards. And take 3 to 14. And then I think we sacrifice Evolving Wilds first to thin out our deck of lands, since we don't really want to draw more lands. And then cast Catalog. Alright, a bunch more lands, don't need all of those. And now 5 mana, we can perfect. Pour over the pages, plus Murderous Compulsion. So untap 2 lands, discard Murderous Compulsion, and use Madness to deal with the wolf. Did find a Brain in a Jar, but it's pretty late in the game now, so not sure if we want to start taking up a Brain in a Jar to try and cast Rise from the Tides at instant speed. or if we just want to cast Rise on this following turn. Opponent with another Werewolf, and there's another Brain. So let's see, we have 3, 4, 5 sorceries only, so that's not a ton. So I don't mind waiting a few more turns since we're still at 14. By playing Brain, this won't transform. And I think we can even, let's see. Yeah, maybe sacrificing the clue first to get some more information is fine here. Alright, Biting Rain is an answer to the Logger, but I don't mind taking 2 damage here, and then casting the Biting Rain next turn, maybe get another creature from our opponent. And wanna play only 1 Brain here, since we also wanna tap it to put a counter on it right away. Opponent with lots of mana, but I'm not sure if they really have any high end. If they don't play anything, they can transform their Werewolf, but it's still gonna die to Biting Rain, even as a 4/2. So we put a counter on the jar, Werewolf transforms, and there's an Evolving Wilds. So we could go for Biting Rain here, and I think we want to. Let's go for it. Get rid of the wolf. And then I think we go with, might as well threaten a counterspell here over playing Evolving Wilds to thin out our deck a bit more. Just to put the fear in our opponent. Still not gonna play out the other jar here, I believe. And then next turn we can potentially play out our other jar. Opponent with 1 card left, put another counter on the jar. They played an Heirloom, so it looks like they have a pretty big werewolf theme. Alright, Murderous Compulsion's not bad. I'm gonna keep ticking up our brains here, so that we don't expose Rise from the Tides to any sweepers. Since we're not under any pressure at the moment. Another land for our opponent, so we can sacrifice Evolving Wilds and put counters on our Brain. Alright, so our opponents apparently had enough. But we're gonna keep playing. So with only 1 card in hand, it's reasonable to run out the Rise from the Tides. But it being the only win condition we have in hand currently, I don't really see a reason to run it out here. And I think I'll keep this Brain on 1 counter so we can cast Murderous Compulsion at instant speed and just keep ticking up the other jar here. Alright, so that's a big werewolf, which we can kill with Murderous Compulsion when it attacks. Gets equipped. And now we can put another counter on it. So if this transforms, it gets First Strike, but not Vigilance, which is the important part here. So we don't need to worry about our opponent having a creature with Vigilance that we can't kill with Murderous Compulsion. But he will get a pretty big werewolf as well as a transformed Heirloom. But I think that's still fine. We could throw away this Biting Rain just to prevent our opponent from transforming the Hunter, which might be fine at this point, since it also puts another sorcery in the graveyard. And then we're getting pretty close to casting Rise from the Tides with our Brain. Opponent with Arling Cord. This could get awkward if our opponent +1s, since then the creature will have Vigilance. So hopefully that doesn't happen. And instead our opponent makes a wolf, which is good for us. And now when the hunter attacks, we can Murderous Compulsion. So tap our jar, put a counter on it, cast Murderous Compulsion, and get rid of that thing. And now on the end step, put another counter on our second brain. Alright. And catalog. Alright, so we can catalog plus Murderous Compulsion the wolf and then Rise from the Tides, which is quite nice. Can even cast a catalog with Brain in a Jar if we want to, so that we save some mana. And then a Rise from the Tides here should be enough to kill our opponent in one hit if we cast these two cards here. Arlen deals 3 to us and transforms back. Another land. The wolf attacks. Can cast a catalog. Draw to discard Murderous Compulsion. Oh, I meant actually to use the Brain in a Jar to cast the catalog, but this is still fine. And then I think we take up both brains here, since we still have a counter up. Don't wanna cast this one, and then cast Arise from the Tides. And I think that's enough here. If we get 10 of them, yep. Unless our opponent can interact. But then we still have Broken Concentration. Alright, sweet. 10 zombies. And get the job done. On to the next one. Alright, let's take a look at our opener, which has a brain. So I think we'll keep. And hope to draw into some more cheap cards, since Par to Waterveil is pretty far away. Opponent on turn 1 Jadi Offshoot, so it looks like we're up against a ramp deck, which could have Reclamation Sage to destroy the Brain in a Jar. Hopefully that doesn't happen. So here we can play out a brain, so next turn we have Broken Concentration plus a brain activation available. Turn 2, are we gonna see a turn 2 ramp card? Could still be a Deathcap Cultivator for our opponent here. Instead it's a Rot Shambler, alright, so maybe our opponent is playing a green-black sacrifice deck of sorts. Biting Rain's not bad, so now we can keep up our counter and brain and pass. Evolutionary Leap. Yeah, I don't really want to let that resolve. Otherwise our opponent can sacrifice a ton of creatures and our removal spells are gonna get quite bad. So we get hit for 1, down to 19. And no third land for our opponent, which is good for us. We could Biting Rain to kill the Shambler, but that doesn't seem worth it. So I'm just gonna keep up Just the Wind and Brain Activation. And slowly work our way up towards 6 counters. Don't mind taking 1 damage here for a couple turns. Especially if our opponent is stuck on 2, which appears to be the case. Alright, hitting land drops is not bad, but we would like to find some action, like some card draw spells. But for now, just happy to pass the turn. And put another counter on the Brain. Not gonna cast our Just to Wind here. And Nagging Thoughts is not a bad one, and I think we'll go for it right now. No reason not to. And Catalog or Broken Concentration. That's actually an interesting decision. With our opponent being stuck on 2 mana, there's not a ton of relevant cards that I want to counter right away, so I think Catalog is fine here. Just digs us a little deeper. We can cast it off Brain in a Jar here. And maybe even Madness a card when we discard. Opponent did find a 3rd land, and now we're potentially gonna see the fireworks. Still happy to take one here. And there's our opponent casting a ramp spell. Let's Brain in a Jar in case we find a counter spell with Catalog. And we did not, but we did find some sweet cards. And let's see. We could Madness the Biting Rain here, which I don't mind. Gets rid of this Rot Shambler, since I don't think Biting Rain is going to be great against this particular opponent. And then Nissa's Pilgrimage is going to find our opponent the lands they were looking for. But now we get to untap and play Jace. We could part the Waterveil just for value, but not being able to put a counter on a jar I think is bad, and then we could combine part the Waterveil plus Rise from the Tides to kill our opponent in a few turns, so let's just play the Jace, play Evolving Wilds, and then next turn we can hopefully transform Jace if our opponent doesn't kill it, and we can still protect it with Just to Wind, should our opponent have a removal spell. So 5 mana, and it's gonna be a Dwynnon, which is fine. So maybe our opponent with an elf sub-theme, and we can just use Just to Wind here if we want to. It does buy us some time, but we could just cast Just to Wind by discarding it to Jace next turn, which seems better, since it's just 1 mana. So we can discard Just to Wind, cast it through Madness. Bounce Dwynnon. And now let's see, we can flash back one of our cards if we want to, like a Nagging Thoughts. Seems fine. Still leaves us with enough mana to cast our counter and put a counter on the jar. Cast our Nagging Thoughts. And keep, I think, Pour Over the Pages, since we can cast it with Brain in a Jar here, which is sweet. Alright, so everything working as intended. Small bug with Jace here, our Nagging Thoughts did not get exiled, which it normally should. So we are gonna get one extra zombie, which we should not have gotten, but hopefully that's not gonna make the difference here. Opponent with 6 mana now. At 7 mana they could cast a Gaia's Revenge, which could hurt. And the reason they're mono green, I'm not quite sure. Maybe they're playing the pump spell that pumps for every forest they control, but they don't have a creature that can actually attack at the moment. So don't need to worry about that. And now we can even Pour Over the Pages and cast Broken Concentration with Madness, which is pretty awesome. And then next turn a Rise from the Tides plus part of Waterveil, and that should seal the deal. So let's cast Pour Over the Pages and counter this behemoth. So untap 2 lands, discard Broken Concentration, and cast it through Madness. So now we have 5 counters on the Brain, and then let's see, we could just end step the zombies and then next turn take an extra turn. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Or we can, let's see, how much mana do we have? I think we can just go for it now. Cast Just a Wind. 3, 6, yeah, we can cast Just a Wind. Then doesn't matter in which order we cast these since part of Waterveil gets exiled, but might as well do it first. Take an extra turn, and then cast Rise from the Tides. Get a bunch of zombies, don't forget to plus Jace, and then opponent is at 25, so they're not quite dead, but in mono green they're not gonna have any sweepers, and could even flash back to make even more zombies, but let's attack first. And I think I'm gonna play it safe here and just plus Jace instead of -3ing. Just in case our opponent goes Mountain into some sort of sweeper. Pass the turn. Jadi Offshoot gets played. Gains a life. And Outland Colossus is not gonna do it here for our opponent. No need to do anything here. Could remove some counters to Scry, but we're not gonna waste our opponent's time. So send in all the zombies. So the extra token did not end up mattering. Alright. Sweet. I wanna thank you for watching, I hope you enjoyed this gameplay, and as always, have a nice day.